Emily Brontë was born in 1818. She was the fifth child of Reverend Patrick Brontë, the son of an Irish peasant. Despite her father being a pastor, Emily seemed to have very few strong feelings towards religion, except as symbolism in her writing. Looking back on her life, one can't really say if she was religious or not, but either way it was a frequent topic in her writing. She had a hard childhood. She lost two of her siblings, Elizabeth and Maria, very early on, and her brother Branwell failed and met failure at every possible turn. Emily was a sick child and continued to be sick into her young adult life, dying at the age of 30. She and her surviving siblings would get through this tough life in England in the 1800s by writing stories and poetry together. They would sit together at the dinner table after everyone else had gone to bed and would come up with stories and worlds. Specifically, they made fantasy worlds called Glasstown, Angria, and Gondal, with the first being ones that all four remaining siblings would write about, and Gondal being something that specifically Emily and her younger sister Anne would work on together. Out of these, most of the writing done by Emily and their younger siblings would come. The three sisters, Charlotte, Emily, and Anne, would, through the efforts mainly of Charlotte, the oldest, try to get their work published under pseudonyms. Emily and Charlotte would frequently fight over their work, Charlotte taking control of the three's writing, more or less, and being more bold as a woman author in a time where that was not really done except for under a pseudonym, even going as far as revealing her identity to the publishers after the success of her novel, Jane Eyre, though it was the success of Jane Eyre and Charlotte's pushing that led to the publishing of Anne's novel, Agnes Grey, and of Emily's, Wuthering Heights. In 1848, the year after Wuthering Heights was published, and following the death of her brother, Emily would get severely ill. She refused medical care and wouldn't even see a doctor until the last day of her life. In her declining health, she refused to eat and spoke to very few people. She died that same year. Little is known about Emily outside of these accounts and her very brief work. Her sisters published a collection of her poetry from her Gondal era of writing, and allegedly she had started writing another novel even more strange than Wuthering Heights, though there is no remaining copy or text from it, and it is often assumed that Charlotte destroyed it after Emily's death due to the strangeness of its content. Emily was supposedly a very private person, didn't care at all for fashion, didn't regularly go to church, and didn't publish anything about her personal life or her opinions. Not much is known about her, but Wuthering Heights would go on to be one of the most influential Gothic romance books of all time. Its bizarre structure and approach to themes made it stand out as surprisingly modern for its time. Its prose, unreliable narrator, and toned-down use of supernatural elements made it nothing like anything else that had been written up to that point, and its lack of any romantic closure or real happiness for any of its main characters made it a very unique story, especially for one published by a woman author at the time. Over the almost 200 years the novel has been published, it's gotten many, many stage adaptations and eventually movie adaptations as the mediums have progressed, and very few are able to capture the depth of the book, cutting key elements because of the tight web of a story Emily weaved. The book would remain a unique and almost untouchable work of fiction. I've talked a lot on this channel about Gothic stories and Gothic movies, and this is because I'm a huge fan of Gothic literature. I got to take a class on it in school, and ever since I've been hooked. The way it uses its tropes, its history, its influences, and ideas, they all make for such compelling stories that I also love aesthetically. I got to see a cathedral when I was in Milan last year, and I just lost my mind. I love ghosts, I love the ideas they convey, I love vampires. I look like a vampire half the time. It all just fits so well. This is why I was absolutely devastated when the new Wuthering Heights movie came out. A Gothic story that I really loved and that has such interesting history and such a compelling message and beautiful imagery was turned into, well, we'll get to that. It was a mess. I don't even hate the movie that much, but the process of the movie itself, the way that it tells the story and adapts the story, I had a lot to say about, and I was gonna make a video about it. But it felt a little bit mean-spirited, right? Like, I have very strong feelings towards every Emerald Fennell movie I've seen, but it's cool to see a woman director have the impact that she's had, and honestly, I think she is a strong director with a good eye for visuals, but her writing just completely destroys that to me. But I didn't just want to make a hit piece on Wuthering Heights, for as easy and profitable as that might be. I wanted to try to say something more about the Gothic as a form of storytelling, especially in the modern world and in movies. And then I went to see the latest movie from David Lowery, a director I've talked about and praised for his work on The Green Knight in the past on this channel, and I was blown away. His newest feature, Mother Mary, was not only a fantastic film, but it was such a good use of the Gothic framework to make a modern and emotionally effective piece of art, and I finally had what I needed to start writing. So without further ado, today I'm actually going to try to use some of the education I've paid a lot of money for to talk about the two most recent Gothic stories to hit theaters, and compare and contrast how they approach Gothic ideas and themes to show what makes a modern Gothic story work. Let's get started. We'll start simply by examining the films themselves on a plot level and pointing out basic themes, ideas, and symbolisms used in both movies, starting with Mother Mary. Mother Mary is a relatively simple story set over pretty much one location that plays out almost like a stage show. It follows Mary, or Mother Mary, or what have you, a famous Gothic pop star who is giving a new tour after a devastating injury while performing and seems deeply disturbed by something and hates the costume that they made for her new tour. Desperately, she flies to see her former partner and essentially co-creator of the Mother Mary persona and famous costume designer, Sam. The two had a major falling out, and now Sam essentially hates Mary, but in a difficult way since they both loved each other and both were so intimately involved in creating what Mother Mary is and the success they both received in their respective careers, so they're kind of intertwined. Mary gets Sam to agree to design a dress for her tour, but on the condition that Sam is able to poke and pry into Mary's life, and she has to answer honestly. The rest of the film consists of the two of them recounting their lives and what led to their separation, both as romantic partners and collaborators. And a realization of something greater slowly seeps out from under the surface, as Sam gives a story of the last time she heard Mary perform, and a time where she encountered a ghost. They very much imply that both of them are very aware that ghosts aren't real, and that the ghost is likely a manifestation of their subconscious or something like that. But Sam's wisdom tooth shattered while watching Mary perform, giving her more pain than she had ever felt in her life, and also intense clarity about the nature of their relationship. Sam felt like she would always be less than Mary. Mother Mary was as much Sam as it was Mary, and yet Mary was the only one who got to live that. Sam's life had become one where she was just a facet of Mary, a tool, a piece of a puzzle. Her existence was defined by Mary, and this grew in a cancerous way, leading to the pain in her tooth and its desperate need for removal. That night, Sam was visited by a red ghost that seemed equal parts blood and cloth. It was what was ripped from her tooth, the embodiment of what she wanted to get rid of. After this intense reveal and the feeling of heightened reality being established, the scared Mary, who has clearly been shaken by something this entire movie, gives her story. That she had also seen the same ghost. At first, Sam thinks Mary is not taking her seriously, but then Mary gives her story. Shortly after Sam had cut ties, on Mary's birthday, she had hired a woman to do a seance, and the seance revealed that something was hunting for Mary, that a spirit was coming from a long way away to find her. Soon the ghost did find her. It haunted her, red and silky, it flowed and chased, but soon Mary had no choice to let it in, to succumb to the spirit, which entered into her through her palms. And finally we get to hear the story of the accident that has haunted the narrative of this story from the beginning. What happened to Mary while performing? Sam had seen the videos, everyone had. Mary was performing on a floating platform during the tour, and then, for almost no reason, seemed to slowly back off the stage, falling, leaving her torn by the harness, and disturbingly hanging there. There had been a lot of speculation about what had caused it. The main theory was that Mary was depressed and even suicidal, as her mental health had deteriorated since Sam left and since the hauntings began. But we see in a vision from Mary's perspective of the events that it was the ghost yet again. It was the ghost that led her off the edge, the ghost that got inside her, that made her feel like her look was wrong, that has been inside her every day since. The two realized that their ghosts are one and the same. The ghost had left from Sam that night, from her tooth, and gone all the way to Mary, never to leave her again. And they resolve to perform an exorcism, to remove the ghost from Mary. They do their own rituals, piercing the hands of Mary, and confronting the fact that they themselves are ghosts of sorts, that they are spirits still in the body, and that their malice and love created the ghost. That ghost was their relationship, their involvement in each other's lives, the creation of each other as people. Sam had ripped it out, removing it like a cancer or a broken tooth, but for Mary it had lingered. The Mother Mary's name and everything that she has and who she's become are tied to Sam. How can she remove her? How can she not remember every time she has a halo on, as that's part of the look that Sam designed? In the end, they are able to reconcile with the ghost, to know that it will always exist, but for Mary to not be possessed by it, to acknowledge that they will always be part of each other, but that they don't need to be consumed by each other. Mary goes back to her tour. Throughout these memories, visions, and exorcisms, Sam was making a dress. She made the look that Mary needed. All her agents and the people relying on her for the new tour find her. Sam and Mary leave each other again, not able to be haunted by the past of each other. It's hard to describe in a summary what makes this film work really well for me. I cried through a lot of the latter half, and I'm not a big crier at movies. But the way that it worked so well was by weaponizing the film and even the stage language for the use of Gothic imagery and storytelling to say something more about who we are as people and what we do to each other. What does existing next to people mean? What does performing for people mean? How we all web and weave into each other's lives. They never settle on whether the ghost was real or metaphorical, and it doesn't matter. It means the same to them either way, and it means the same to us. Whether we have a soul, a spirit, a ghost, or not, we are people together. We exist around each other, and what we do ripples into each other. We are connected in ways we can't even imagine, and this could be something supernatural, or it could be part of the human condition and nature. What difference does it make when a ghost hurts all the same, when self-doubt and self-loathing come for us all? We are all of the same spirit, and I think that's a really beautiful story. Now let's talk about Wuthering Heights. And in defense of Wuthering Heights, in comparison sense, this story is not a beautiful story, and it was never meant to be. Even the original one is one of malice and suffering, so don't get caught up in that comparison. But the film, Wuthering Heights, follows the story of the manor of Wuthering Heights as Mr. Earnshaw brings home a boy he rescued to his daughter Kathy or Catherine and their servant Nellie. Kathy becomes emotionally attached to the boy and names him Heathcliff. As kids, the two of them became inseparable. But soon hard times fall on the manor, as Mr. Earnshaw is an alcoholic and a gambling addict and abusive to the kids. As they become adults, the situation gets worse monetarily, and a wealthy family, the Lintons, move in nearby. Kathy becomes determined to get in with their family and marry the head of their house, Edgar, to save the family from destitution. But at the same time, Heathcliff and Kathy have found that they have had mutual feelings for each other for years, and promised to always be there for each other. But Heathcliff, being little more than a servant himself, can offer nothing to Kathy, save for the promise that they made to each other as kids. Heathcliff is, of course, against Kathy's marriage, but soon, due to an injury on their property, the Lintons take in Kathy, and Edgar falls for her. Edgar proposes, and Kathy is torn and feels guilty for not being with Heathcliff, but as she talks to Nellie about it, she becomes very defensive and rude to Nellie, saying that nobody loves her and she's never loved anybody, so what does she know for advice? Just as Heathcliff is coming to hear their conversation, Nellie notices Heathcliff's approach, and in spite, leads Cathy to say that marrying Heathcliff would be beneath her as a person and would degrade her. This conversation causes Heathcliff to leave, as Cathy gets married. Heathcliff leaves for years, as Catherine settles into her marriage with Edgar, and his continued attempts to get a child. After 5 years, it finally happens, and Cathy is pregnant. But right around this same time, Heathcliff at last returns. He is mysteriously now wealthy and looks like a distinguished gentleman. He buys Wuthering Heights from the dying Mr. Earnshaw and proceeds to try and woo and marry the desperate Isabella, Edgar's ward, to make Cathy increasingly jealous and get his revenge. In his revenge, he treats Isabella horribly, both abusing her and bringing her into like a degrading BDSM relationship, completely stripping her of her personhood, and even going as far as killing her dog. This is much to the dismay of everybody else, and especially Catherine, who, seeing how monstrous Heathcliff has become, and feeling intense guilt over abandoning him and their promise, starts to get sick and starve herself in her room. Heathcliff tries to reconnect with Cathy to say that this was all out of love for her and that he still wanted her, but Nellie stops the letters from going through, making Cathy think that Heathcliff doesn't even care for her anymore and that he just wants revenge. Her failing health leads to a miscarriage of the baby, and as Nellie finally brings the news to Heathcliff of her failing health and the way she is intercepted in their coming together, Heathcliff rides desperately to Cathy, but it's already too late. She's already dead, and Heathcliff curses Cathy to not go to heaven, but instead to stay and haunt Heathcliff to drive him mad, so she can fulfill her promise that they would never be apart. This story is a dark and sad one of obsession and love. Kind of. I have to say it doesn't really sell me. Not at all like the book does, even with the massive changes it makes to the book. Which I have no problem with making massive changes when it comes to doing adaptations. You definitely need to, but I'm just not exactly sure what they were going for. This movie seems very turned on by Heathcliff's monstrous nature, turning his abuse from the book into something kinkier and like literally having pet play. In general, it seems to find the story of Cathy and Heathcliff's doomed love to be hot that they would destroy themselves for each other, that Heathcliff, even after everything, would wish Cathy to be damned before leaving him, and that in part Cathy would wish the same. This isn't inherently a bad idea, but it doesn't take that story into very engaging paths. Not too much happens in this 2.5-hour story. Even the BDSM elements that were added to the story seem almost like afterthoughts, keeping the movie lost between being faithful to the plotting of the original story, but also taking it in completely different directions and ending in a drastically different place. I was left with a feeling of pointlessness when I saw Heathcliff carry out Cathy's body. As he cried out for her, I didn't feel the extension of obsession and love. I just felt sad and a little annoyed that Cathy would do what she did, or that Nellie would do what she did, because they never really captured the stakes of that inner insanity that any of the characters get. Cathy gets turned on by watching someone do horse pet play, and I think that is truly what they're trying to imply is Cathy's wilder side. The fact that she would find something so crude as BDSM hot shows the insanity underneath. I don't know. That doesn't seem like a message Fennel herself would go for, but that's what I mean. The story is confused, and worse than that, it's boring. It lacks almost all the elements that made this a Gothic story in the first place. But let's examine that more. What actually makes a story Gothic? And how did we get to this point with both of these films? What works about Mother Mary but just didn't connect in Wuthering Heights? We'll examine these through two major ideas: the uncanny and the female Gothic. Andrew Smith, who sounds like a made-up guy in his introductory book Gothic Literature, explores the ideas of what actually makes something Gothic. This term has developed over hundreds of years, and at different times meant different things to different cultures, audiences, and artists. This is what makes defining Gothic in the academic sense so hard. It's kind of a collection of separate but similar ideas carried over from human myth to architecture, to old and modern places. What Smith then proposes is what the central thread through all of these stories and movements is the uncanny. Not just the uncanny in the idea of something supernatural or even creepy, though that is often the case, but instead of the psychoanalytical idea of the uncanny. What was considered strange, other, or unknown. This brings in the historical aspect of what it means to be Gothic. What is Gothic is often defined by what was historically seen as uncanny. These are often the two lenses that are used when analyzing Gothic texts, the historical and the psychoanalytical. And while some propose that in your analysis you have to use one or the other, Smith and other scholars, and me as well, would say that you need both to properly understand what makes a text Gothic. So let's talk about the two stories. What in them falls under this understanding of the uncanny, both as a cultural, mental, and supernatural force that can be present in these stories? Let's first look at Mother Mary. This is a story with several elements that could be seen as culturally uncanny. The fact that this movie centers around a lesbian relationship is not lost on me for its historical context. While I wouldn't say society currently views lesbians as uncanny per se, especially in the pop star sphere, the queer identity in this film is part of what makes the relationship between Mary and Sam work so well. The private nature of what they have. The unspoken implications that Mary never told people about her relationship with Sam, either for personal or production reasons. This gives their intimacy with each other in the movie a special and secret quality, hidden in a way that they could only tap into. There also has to be some view of this through the lens of Mary being a pop star. In the text, there's a lot of focus on the idea that Mother Mary no longer becomes a person when performing. She becomes a symbol or a conduit. And this is a central motif in the movie, as Mary throughout the film is revealed to literally be a conduit for a ghost or spirit that has possessed her. So there is also present in the uncanny the idea of fame, and especially of performers and artists, being almost uncanny in the way that they exist in the world. Their existence is stripped back for the sake of art, or the sake of fame. For Mother Mary, the film goes out of its way to show that other people are channeling emotions through her. She becomes the conduit as they can release their sadness through her music. This is also what makes her so emotionally inept in the movie, why she needs Sam to be able to articulate her emotions. She's been a conduit for too long. She's forgotten what it means to be a person. She herself has been reduced to a spirit or a symbol. And lastly, in Mother Mary, there is simply the idea of the supernatural uncanny, both in the sense of the fact that there is a supernatural creature in this, but also in the cultural understanding of what this means to people. Throughout the movie, both Sam and Mary talk about the fact that they intellectually know there is no such thing as spirits or ghosts, and yet this ghost has been present to both of them. And while they logically know that it isn't there, it still is. This idea goes more to the psychological understanding and perhaps the spiritual understanding of the uncanny. Our world doesn't really resemble anymore the world when so much of Gothic literature was made, where the threat of spiritual attack was taken so seriously. We don't believe anymore that when somebody dies mysteriously, they were probably a vampire. We don't believe that our visions and dreams hold meaning within, at least on a grand societal level. So while ghosts and apparitions in former Gothic tales were striking, they were more often tragic, giving signs and dreams to the viewer, warning them of dangers to come. Yet in Mother Mary, the idea of the ghosts, as we see in the seance scene, the very brief presence of belief in something from beyond is lent to fear. It shows that ghosts in this world only appear to the broken, to those who so desperately need to see a ghost that their own logic and belief is taken over, and their spirit starts to manifest before them. Because the ghost of this movie is not some former person. It's not the dead or the lost. It's the main characters themselves. The red spirit that haunts them is a manifestation of their own past, their own trauma. So in this sense, the spirit, the ghost, is the main uncanny that ties this together into being Gothic. Of course it is. There's honestly nothing more Gothic than a ghost. Again, Gothic is not just one thing that can be tied down, it is both its uncanny and its aesthetics, and this is also one element that brings the aesthetics into Gothic, besides the actual look and themes of Mother Mary as a performer with her halos and religious-themed music. And it is in these scenes with our ghost that the movie really comes to life. This blend of practical effect is beautiful, and the performances in scenes like the bathtub scene are phenomenal. The uncanny for Mother Mary is one of cultural and psychological combination, and it centers around the idea of the fear of spirits, not in a literal sense, but in the sense that there's this fear of what Mary has become as a performer, that she has become a shell and a spirit. There's also a fear that spirits themselves can be real, and the central fear that not only do we have spirits, but that our spirits become tied to others, mixed together and tangled without our consent. Despite what you want, the past will always haunt you. This haunting can be that of an old friend visiting you, or it can be the horror that sends you over the edge while performing. This is the uncanny of Mother Mary. This is the Gothic, and man, it's effective. So what about Wuthering Heights? What is its uncanny that is presented in the movie? To get that, I would first love to talk about the original novel. I want to try not to harp on it too much. I know that I opened with that backstory on Brontë, and it feels almost inevitable that I would talk about the position that the book takes in relation to the movie. But I really want to be fair as a critic and as an academic writer to the movie. Again, I believe that the movie owes mostly nothing to the original story in terms of what it has to do or what it has to go for. But here I think speaking on what the original book has as the uncanny as best I can, which is hard since the book is so thematically dense, will give some perspective on what is lacking in the uncanny of Fennell's Wuthering Heights. So, what is the uncanny of the original Wuthering Heights? Well, it's a lot. Chiefly, though, it's a story about love. Not a love story by any means, but a story about how love can lead to obsession, hate, suffering, and insanity. There's so much uncanny in this story. The fact that this is a recounted story told by unreliable narrators is uncanny. The idea that God is love and that love can be so cruel and hateful, perhaps God is cruel and hateful, perhaps the idea of ultimate forgiveness is impossible to obtain for humans, and the eternal punishment to those who cannot forgive and forget those who have wronged them, especially in relation to love, is one of the cruelest things of all. Culturally, there's a lot of uncanny in this story as well. The uncanny of intense wealth and intense poverty. The divide that money plays in the story leads to their downfall and the main drive of Catherine to consider Edgar so intensely. And one of the most major pieces left out in almost every adaptation is Heathcliff's race. There's no way around it, and really no good excuse for why almost every adaptation has left this out. But Heathcliff isn't supposed to be white. It isn't said exactly what race he is, just that he was from somewhere far away and that his skin is dark. And this isn't an offhand remark that comes up once, it comes up frequently within the book, that Heathcliff's skin is dark, that his hair is dark. He is an uncanny figure to these rich white people in the story, and that plays into a lot of what this story is actually doing and saying about people, about money, love, and obsession. Heathcliff's otherness is what first makes Catherine find him interesting. She grew up well-to-do. To see Heathcliff, she saw him as a plaything almost, something to own and possess, and this is why she herself names him. And Hindley, who is for some reason completely cut out of the latest film adaptation, but is Catherine's brother for those who haven't read the book, sees Heathcliff as a disgusting parasite, and hates that their father seems to like Heathcliff so much more than him. It was Hindley who takes over Wuthering Heights and becomes the alcoholic abuser of Heathcliff, but it's only after Heathcliff disappears and returns, after Catherine has married Edgar that we see the central transformation of Heathcliff both into a gentleman and a monster. His race is why he was ostracized, but it was his attempt to become the rich, idealized, and white ideal of a proper person that led him to become the obsessive and violent person we see him be later in the story. His obsession with Catherine is there because she was one of the only people who didn't treat him poorly, and that's the uncanny and dramatic irony and even horror of the latter half, when we see what's become of Heathcliff after Catherine's death. He's taken in Cathy, Edgar and Catherine's daughter, who is also cut from the movie, and has become an insane, reclusive, and abusive head of the household, still obsessed with Catherine, unable to rest. It's only after the death of Heathcliff, Catherine, and Edgar that the other characters in the story can move on and find peace and know that the two of them are at peace, because this is again a story about the way that people try to control others. Obsession, love, God, race. There's a lot more that I could talk about in this story, but I'm trying to be brief. We're not here to examine the original book, we're here to talk about the movie. So what is the uncanny in the movie, and why did I bring all this up from the book? Well, that's the whole problem with the movie, and why I think bringing up the book is important. The movie doesn't know what it wants the uncanny to be, and so, by default, what Fennell seemingly is interested in, the things that fill that void in the story are BDSM and poverty, and both of these things aren't fleshed out well, but also have troubling implications for the actual themes of the story. The BDSM present in the film, which is far less than you'd think coming off of Saltburn, and for all the advertising of this movie, is used both as a form of sexual awakening and a form of cruelty from Heathcliff. And this is where it becomes the uncanny of the movie. It's always portrayed as something monstrous almost, something scary and other, but tantalizing, a temptation for Cathy that Heathcliff needs to hide her from. It is this dynamic that is implied to be the reason Cathy finds Heathcliff attractive as they get older. Heathcliff is huge and rough, and that means he can manhandle her and be rough with her. But by the time we get to the relationship with Isabella for revenge, this is the only other time this dynamic specifically is shown in the film, and it's framed as horrifying to Nellie and not ultimately effective for an audience to Cathy because she never hears about it. Heathcliff turns her into a dog and kills the actual dog. Like Saltburn before it, it runs into the problem of framing its sexual content as always transgressive. For Saltburn, it made the movie feel weirdly homophobic, despite the content of the film, as all the gay-leaning sexual interactions were predatory just for the sake of shock. Similarly, it turns the BDSM elements and ideas of sexual experimentation into part of Heathcliff's rage, and a part of his other, in which he is separated from normal people. And it is this sexual transgression that is used to build some of the only Gothic atmosphere around this entire movie. Since it drops most of the actual plot of the book, the majority of the story that it tells is just not that Gothic. It's just an ordinary drama, more in the line of work of Jane Austen than Emily Brontë. Not to say that Austen didn't play into Gothic ideas and like Gothic stuff. I've actually talked about her involvement in Gothic stuff before in another video. It's pretty cool. I love Jane Austen's work. It is used to frame Heathcliff as inhuman, which doesn't even fit the point of his rage and abuse in the original story. Heathcliff was an abused and ridiculed boy in the original, ostracized, so his rage against society and especially against rich people made sense. His monstrosity only appeared once he adopted the rich people's ideals and aesthetics to gain what he was after. Here, the introduction of BDSM is brought to us by poor people, and so the aesthetics it's tied to in the movie are the poor and the lower class. This makes the framing of what happens to Isabella bad, not because she's getting abused or anything, but because she is being brought down below her class. Which brings us to the other uncanny in this movie, the poor. This movie has a big problem with how it goes about portraying its classes. It wants to lavish in the beauty of the Lintons' household, show them as beautiful people with beautiful clothes. Their only problem in the story is perhaps being a little too naive. But Mr. Earnshaw, he's a disgusting poor drunk beggar who beats kids, and who they go out of their way to show time and time again is disgusting and abhorrent. and it's usually tied to his lack of hygiene, which is tied to his lack of money and his addiction. In the original story, is Mr. Earnshaw a good person? No, not really. He neglects his kids in favor of Heathcliff and is also just not a very good father, but it is Henley who's the abusive one, the one who does it to Heathcliff out of jealousy. He's the one who winds up in shambles and losing Wuthering Heights to Heathcliff, and it's a moment of power as Heathcliff, who is abused by a jealous older boy, is able to see that boy falling apart due to jealousy and greed taking him over. Because Henley is not present in the film adaptation, all the burden of plot falls onto Mr. Earnshaw, and the only way that Fennel can think to aesthetically deal with that is by making him disgusting and poor. By proxy, Heathcliff is rough here because he is also poor. It doesn't get too much into his backstory, but he is beaten by Mr. Earnshaw, and he is poor, uneducated, and so therefore he is angry and violent and backwards. When he comes back to try and win Cathy back in the movie, these edges are actually more or less sanded down besides the scenes with Isabella. He is not a brute anymore. He is shown to be well composed, and if anything, more annoyed with the Lintons and Cathy than filled with jealousy and forced to become a shell of person due to the insanity of love. There's no real insanity in this movie. No feverish dreams, no visions, no revenge, no religious themes at all. There's shockingly little of what makes Wuthering Heights Wuthering Heights, which in theory is fine, but what's left is a drama that barely has any plot, so to have any semblance of this still be the great Gothic work that's so loosely copying, the aesthetic burden of the uncanny required to make it Gothic is placed on the shoulder of aesthetic low-hanging fruit, the poor, the sexually deviant. I can almost guarantee this isn't intentional. I don't get any malice or anti-poor or especially anti-sex vibes from Fennel at all, but I think she so misunderstood the work she was adapting, and like with her other movies got so caught up in aesthetics, things that she thought were tantalizing and transgressive, that she inadvertently made the movie almost antithetical to the original story from an aesthetic perspective, and I think antithetical to what Fennel herself wants to promote, and to the heart of one of the key aspects of Gothic literature, which is just being anti-rich. This is what frustrated me so much about the movie. It isn't poorly made from most metrics, but its writing is so confused that it can barely even be called a Gothic story at all. So one of the big things that we can pick up from this is that if you're going to make a Gothic story in the modern age, you have to really understand what you want your uncanny to be, to power what actually makes it Gothic. But we still haven't fully figured out where these films diverge in terms of creating Gothic for modern audiences. So next, we'll take a look at its other form of critical reading that's often applied to Wuthering Heights, both in book and movies, and Mother Mary could also fall into, the female Gothic. Okay, so what is the female Gothic? Diana Wallace, in her book, The Female Gothic, explains it simply as a mode of academic criticism and writing within the Gothic movement. Female Gothic is a subcategory within the study of Gothic literature for the huge movement of female authors who took up and defined much of the Gothic space, as well as the feminist recontextualization of previous Gothic works by male or female authors. It's important historically because so many of the foundational Gothic books and themes that helped define its aesthetics and ideas were written by women. But the concept itself is hard to define for like a YouTube video essay, and some see it as kind of an unnecessary and almost reductive separation from the general Gothic. Why does there need to be a female Gothic as a separate idea from Gothic? But I'm not the one to answer these questions. Wallace goes on to break down the female Gothic into two major thematic categories: the Anne Radcliffe Gothic, of women in trouble running from dangerous men and monsters, and the Mary Shelley Gothic, of the expression of women's experiences, for Shelley, birth and the horrors associated with it, where it does not matter as much about having a woman protagonist as much as it does having thematic or historical lenses for women. Female Gothic literature was one of the first places where it was seen as socially acceptable for women to critique the world of men and for their treatment and fears. though many, even through this progress, see the Gothic in general as a conservative movement, especially in its view on gender roles. Many of these Gothic stories, even the ones written by women, often have intensely gendered stories. Women always get married, are weak, and usually need saved by some outside force. This is one of the troubles of adaptations of, like, Dracula. They have a hard time dealing with this. The story didn't exactly age well in terms of its framing of women, even though there is somewhat of a progressive message about gender roles and sexuality in its themes if you read it through specific lenses. Modern adaptations like Eggers' Nosferatu can make this story work a lot better for the modern age by changing the amount of agency the Mina and Lucy characters have within the story. The more recent development of the lesbian Gothic, an offshoot of the female Gothic, focuses on the opposite idea of the conservative Gothic, showing the relation between radical gender feminism and the subversive nature and subject matter allowed to be shown in Gothic stories. This spawned an entire subgenre within European cinema in the 70s and 80s of Gothic lesbian movies, though oftentimes these movies would still get made by male directors who would represent lesbians and women as more sex objects than characters. Shout out to Vampire Lesbos for not actually doing that for most of its runtime, funnily enough. It's actually surprisingly a pretty good movie. But in literature, the lesbian Gothic has been allowed to breathe more within its own terms, with, shocker, actual lesbians, or at the very least women, authoring more of the modern movement. The purpose of this category, though, and just general critical studies like this in art, isn't inherently to check a box or not about something being like a feminist movie or not, or even to say if a piece of art is bad or not, but instead to grab a greater sociological and analytical meaning from the piece. With all that being said, let's take a look at these movies through the lens of the female Gothic to see if there's anything else we can glean about what makes one work over the other. For Wuthering Heights, the story is shockingly bland, in sharp contrast to Bronte's original story, whom Brontë herself is viewed as a mother of female Gothic literature. Her book was one of class and racial struggle in a world where the only way to escape your means as a woman or a person of color is to subject yourself to the horrors of upper-class society. Arranged marriages, wicked aristocrats, to the point where you either die or go insane. Fennel's Heights instead plays the story of Catherine like a sad love story and nothing more, where class divides them, but it's not entirely a systemic thing, and is more of an individual type problem, where Catherine's death, which punctuates the story, leaving out any of the aftermath of Heathcliff's insanity, is seen more as a reaction to Catherine being unable to get what she wants. She goes crazy out of spite for losing Heathcliff and kills herself over it. This falls far more into the conservative female Gothic, one that implicitly portrays its women as romantic or sexual objects who are either prudes or would wither away and die without the romantic affection of their Tumblr uwu tallboy. It again falls into the same form of problem that you see in all of Fennel's writing. Most notably for comparison is Promising Young Woman, a feminist movie by all accounts of what it's trying to go for. It's dealing with very heavy and serious subject matter, but yet because of its aesthetics and the fact that most of the story is not well thought through, this revenge story becomes this strangely toned mess that barely works to prop up women. It wants to be this cool, epic story about revenge where she's so cool and epic for getting back at all of these guys who are predators, but then it doesn't have the bite for her to do something like most revenge movies, like kill them or give any true punishment other than scare them, and the finale, which, like, yeah, sure, the police will help resolve this long over case. That always works. And on top of the failure to take the plot where it needed to go, to sell it as like a schlocky revenge movie, it also really wants to pathologize its protagonist and criticize the fact that she's so caught up in what happened. Cassie is a shell of a person, and instead of the revenge movie trying to restore her, it takes the albeit more realistic and healthy route of honestly critiquing how she's expressing that, but then also wants her to be cool and awesome and be like a revenge winner. Fennel can't seem to get around what she wants the story to be. Who is Heathcliff supposed to be in the story? Who is Cathy supposed to be in the story? What about Nellie? What role do women have in this movie? It doesn't seem like the movie really cares beyond getting to the parts that almost would make a good romance. The fact that she grows sick without Heathcliff is romantic in a literary sense. The fact that Heathcliff would go to such lengths is hot, and that's where the thinking ends. But the text and individual plot bumps out against this and weakens the entire reading. I don't think Fennell wanted to make one of the most conservative-feeling Gothic movies I've seen in a while, but she did. On the other hand, Lowry's Mother Mary is not like a lesbian Gothic story in the academic sense, although it's about lesbians. It's hardly transgressive. Exactly the opposite, in fact. It portrays the Gothic in a form of a pure ghost story, and this ghost story from the perspective of the female Gothic is one that hardly deals with women on the terms of women at all, except for the weight of self-achievement and image. Much of the fallout between the former lovers, Mary and Sam, comes from the fact that Mary is an acceptable public form of female empowerment. She gains popularity and success as a woman through the lens of a pop star. She is an emotional anchor that other people use. This is historically a subjugating role of women in society, and Mary's own strength and popularity and identity are not even based solely on her own experience, but also largely on the experiences of Sam, a black costume designer who forged Mother Mary's brand and several of her through lines thematically as an artist, but never received any credit for it. Their stories and their lives are then intertwined, not allowed to exist without the other. This becomes the central form of the ghost, one that represents a malignant intertwining of female souls via life and creation, that leads to self-destruction on both of their parts. It uses this narrative platform of art, erasing true history to the point that ghosts are left behind to show how much women are forgotten in the narrative of the world, of art, and even in relationships to other people and each other. In my opinion, this works effectively under a feminist reading, although that's clearly not the film's primary goal. The central feminist idea present in Mother Mary of the erasure of women's roles in art, especially the idea of a black and queer woman's story and face getting left out of the story, is very funny in the context of Fennell's Wuthering Heights, which seemingly erases all of the history and ideas that Brontë put into her story, forgetting the racial elements central to the story of classism, and effectively eliminating the even somewhat dated feminist subtext present in the original work. But again, I don't love this. I don't love saying Wuthering Heights is bad and dumb and stupid and Mother Mary is smart and understands women better. I mean, Wuthering Heights was made by a woman, adapting a story by a woman, and Mother Mary is made by, like, this guy. He's just some guy. I've come out of all of Fennell's movies extremely frustrated by her as a writer, but I have been hesitant to make any videos about her in any grand takedown kind of way because I do think she has merit as an artist. I enjoyed Saltburn, that's what I made the video about. She has a clear artistic voice, she's a good director, and I can't say I didn't have a lot of fun with the early screener for that movie. So where does the idea of examining these films through the lens of the female Gothic lead me? What is the central divide between these movies through the lens of female Gothic, if not actually having a woman as an author? Well, one thing I think it shows is that for the modern Gothic movie to work, it has to take a modern approach to what it wants to say. Mother Mary is so strong in its Gothic ideas around women, not because the movie is especially feminine or has some divine feminine touch to it, but simply because it focuses on what it wants to say and what it wants to be about. It moves with certainty. This is one of the benefits of it being an original script from Lowry, but an adaptation from Fennell. Fennell had the harder job to try and take this story, so dense and well-loved, and turn it into something new, and something that spoke to her. And I don't think her vision is inherently a bad one. I don't think taking a BDSM lens to the story is a bad idea. I don't think focusing on this more as a romance is a bad idea. I understand where she was coming from for so many of these decisions, but to make it a Gothic movie, to make it a Gothic story, and especially to make it a good story, you have to understand what your aesthetics are saying. Wuthering Heights uses the aesthetics and even the language of a film that is concerned about the female Gothic. It's adapting a story that defined them. It's directed by a woman that is known for pushing boundaries, but for a woman audience. It was a big push for Valentine's Day, but the movie never uses those aesthetics it's wielding to say anything meaningful about women or for women. Not that it has to be the most profound movie in the world. I wouldn't call Mother Mary profound in this sense. It's a very simple, almost painfully simple story. Its major metaphor is such a played out thing that I'm surprised it works. But the difference is, the focused use of aesthetics bring Mother Mary great emotional clarity, whereas the mixed aesthetics of Fennel and Brontë and years of adaptation and expectation merge together into something that has nothing to say and not much to do, and it turns into a boring movie. But this can't be it, right? The thesis of my video is don't use Gothic aesthetics if you aren't gonna know what you want to say with them. I mean, yeah, kind of, sure, whatever. I don't think this is the most fascinating or groundbreaking thing, but I think it's pointed out that aesthetics have meaning, and that knowing how to use those aesthetics and subtext matters. I like transgressive cinema a lot. Some of the best movies I've seen are pushing the boundaries of societal norms. That is something I love about Gothic cinema and Gothic writing. It's able to push things far and fantastical, and exploring the concepts of greed and power and love in ways that you never see it. Creatures and ghosts and big mansions come to life as there's meaning to what they are and how they formed. The vampire isn't compelling to me just because it's a cool creature. The vampire is compelling because it means something, and that meaning changes with each iteration, each take on it, and each society that birthed it. I opened this video about Brontë because her context matters to the story she wrote. Her complicated relationship with religion mattered. The tragedy that constantly plagued her life mattered. Her brother, her sisters, the time that she grew up in, all of these things helped form what Wuthering Heights became. Similarly, Mother Mary is a David Lowery story. If you listen to the podcast he did with Anne Hathaway for A24, you can hear this is a very personal story to David. The way that the text of the story are focused on dialogue reflects his own inability to express his emotions and feelings through art. The push and pull of Sam and Mary are the push and pull that reflect his real-life experiences, and the way that ghosts have affected them reflects the things that have affected Lowery. The use of pop music and pop stardom also sets up the social and historical subtext necessary for the text and what it's saying about emotional conduits. But what about Fennel's Wuthering Heights? What does it have to say about her perspective, about our time we're living in now? Honestly, the big thing it says to me is that she just doesn't have good literacy. I don't know how she ended up such a solid director, such a big user of strong aesthetics, without ever seeming to comprehend their meaning. It's happened time and time again in her work, and it's had differing success. But the take on Wuthering Heights, a dense Gothic text, can't be taken so haphazardly. Not because it's some sacred text, but simply because, without thought, without meaning to the aesthetics you see, and the historical context of the story, there just isn't any story. It's boring. And it reminds me of an interview clip I saw around the release of Saltburn, where Fennel mentioned Call Me By Your Name, both as an inspiration and as a joke. She jokes about how she would have handled the peach scene differently. But even this joke shows that she's continually obsessed with things being shocking and transgressive, but not textually relevant. The peach scene works in the context of Call Me By Your Name because of the symbolism in it and the setup of the scene. If he had eaten the peach like Fennel wanted him to, it would have turned it into something that went so far that it took away from the tone of the rest of the movie. Luca Guadagnino is no stranger to transgressive films, and is also one of my favorite directors. A lot of his films not only deal with hard and often problematic subject matter, but are held together by the fact that Guadagnino really understands what his films are going for, especially in their aesthetics, which can wildly change from film to film. I did a whole video on Why I Love Bones and All, which itself is an American Gothic story. but it wields its imagery and its tone and even its shocking scenes, like the scene where Lee kills a guy while jerking him off, to such great effect that they're really strong in the movie and aren't just used for shock, but are used to continue the story about downtrodden people doing whatever they can to survive, and the film makes you hurt when it's revealed that he had a family. Similar things are done in his Suspiria and Queer, and even his recent movie After the Hunt. Not to just sit here and yap about why I like Guadagnino so much, but his films are great examples of the type of films that Fennell, I think, has the chops to make, which is a huge compliment, but I think she needs to change her focus onto the right things and focus her themes more on the aesthetics that they want to go for. Something like Mother Mary shows the continued power and simplicity. Lowery doesn't do anything revolutionary. He doesn't tell a crazy complex story, but what he does is use his aesthetics very simply to tell a personal and emotional story that made me cry in theaters. Wuthering Heights just made me bored and upset afterwards. The Gothic can be powerful, beautiful, frightening, funny. It can tell us about society. It can comment on the unknown, on religion, on marginalized groups. It's one of my favorite genres thematically and aesthetically, and I hope we keep getting more experiments in the genre, both good and bad. I'll always be there to watch them. I just hope they're actually Gothic. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I know this video took forever to put out. I spent a long time writing this script. I read 3 books for research on this. The links to those are in the description. Please go check them out if you're interested on any of these subjects. They're books that I got through my school and were some of the textbooks I had to read when I was taking my class on Gothic literature. But they're very good, very simple introductory level stuff, and helped inform a lot of what I was going for in this video. Please check them out. Yeah, thank you guys for sticking with this channel. Thank you guys for all of the support and everything that we've had. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment and subscribe. Comment some cool Gothic story you're excited about, or like a movie you consider Gothic that isn't like traditionally Gothic or something like that. I think Park Chan-wook loves to make Gothic films. I mean, he literally made the Southern Gothic film Stoker, but I would say that even his other movies like The Handmaiden and somewhat even Oldboy can fall into Gothic aesthetics. The Gothic is such a loose idea that it can be used to so many cool things. It's so good. I love Gothic stuff. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm gonna try and continue to keep putting stuff out on a consistent basis. I'm busy as always, but I always love working on this YouTube channel, and I really hope to continue to grow, especially so I can spend more time getting videos out more consistently. Money is tough. Money's always tough. But again, thank you guys. I love you all. Go watch some good movies. Good night.